Hi everyone, I'm glad to see you all here to talk about APIs and how we can work all together. So first part, thanks to API Days to having me presenting here and to be able to talk about how I am working and we are all working and how we should thrive to work together with multiple people from different teams, different background every day to build better API and to allow us to build better communication, better way to communicate between us. So first, something that is really important to know is we are all working with API. Maybe we don't know we are working with API or using API, but we are all working with API daily. From my parents using or paying something online every day on Amazon, or you taking maybe the bus or the subway using your credit card, or maybe using your smartphone to enter the subway, or maybe you to try to, I don't know, to buy an online game and to play with friends. We are all working with API even if we don't know it. Even every day when you are working inside your company, you will use API, maybe to get some data, maybe to send a file to someone, but you are using API. So API become really crucial in how we are working and how, how we need to build our ecosystem. One of the main issues, though, is every time I'm talking about APIs, especially in my company or anywhere else, API is always seen as something that is just technical. Most of the question will always be around how this API is working. How should it be working? Am I implementing my API with Node.js? Am I using Java? Should I rewrite it using Rust? This kind of question. And the last one is most of the time we're always asking which cloud architecture should I use? Should I be using Azure? Should I be using AWS with Lambda and serverless technology? Should I be using DynamoDB databases? Should I be using GCP to do some compute? It's always linked to the technologic part, and to and, and that bothers me because it's never seen as a business solution or a way to open new business for your company. And I'm here to talk about that, how and why we should all try to change this mindset and to have people and to find solution for business to be involved in the creation of APIs. But first of all, I'm Jean Burellier. I'm currently working for Sanofi, being a team lead and leading a platform team for the company. I'm also a professor at Supinfo, that is a French university about computer science. And you also can find me contributing to multiple open source projects, main one being Node.js. But you can find me on other projects, for example, Express or React, mostly contributing to JavaScript ecosystem as a whole. I'm also really passionate about like community. I like to build and being involved in community, presenting to conferences, but also to travel. And I'm French, so I really like food. You can also find me if you want to exchange with me on Twitter, on Blue Sky, or on GitHub if you want. So please ping me if you have any question or want to discuss about how you can bring this kind of mindset to your company and how people can just start sharing about APIs, business, and engineering. So we are here to talk about battle-tested API, tech and business working together. Why is this title? First, because it's really important. You cannot build API just looking at the technology side. It's not really worth it. And on the other part, the business rely and need API to be thriving and to open new business opportunity. So why not working together? One way, great. So let's all sit at the same table, discuss about API, discuss why API are great, that we need new APIs. People from the business that will understand everything, people from the engineering part, which will agree to build what was discussed, and we are done. Great. Like 5 minute discussion, we are successful, we are all happy with what we just did, and problem solved. No more issue, we can finish the day, finish the week, world is saved, perfect, right? That would be great. That would be amazing, even. Unfortunately, it's not really how everything happens. But first, let's see what we will discuss today. First, API. it's always nice to discuss about what's an API. Quickly, it's not the main topic, but API are great. How do we define what's an API? But also how we can change the world and change the mindset of people that are building API and using API in a company world. And how can we like bridge between business and engineering? How can we break this kind of two worlds that are most of the time really hard to discuss and to talk about API and to see it as one common way to work together? So first, vision of API. Great. Let's start with that. Today, we are all using API. Like I said, both us being human, but also machine. For us, we consume everything, every data we use. We are using this kind of technology. A smartphone, maybe a laptop, maybe tablet, maybe you have a smartwatch also, or everything that you can use, smart TV, desktop, everything is used for us to consume data and to visualize data. But for machines, it's not really the same. They are mostly using this kind of data to process information, to deliver information to you. But for them, it's not seen as something visual. It's just binary information. And also, if you work inside a company, even if you display some or maybe a lot of information through displays, the main core and the main, let's say, a big number of information will be hidden by everyone because it will be just API server communicating between them and exchanging data and information to process some third-party information. So most of the time, an API is not seen as a product because people just basically don't know it exists. So data is just seen as a way to represent information. If you don't see this information coming back and forth, you don't think about it. So, for example, if you're working, or I was working before Sanofi, I was working for an insurance company, but even today, we all need to provide information assertion. So you need an application to create a contract. Great. People will see or maybe use one or two web pages or maybe a mobile application. Same if you want to sign a PDF online or if you want to interact with a social network. Like, it's really easy for us today to just take our smartphone, take a picture, post something on Instagram, write a message. Great. Most of the people will see one or two pages, that's all. But behind that, you have maybe 10, 20, 30 API that allow you to see information, to communicate, to exchange something, to check that you are an authenticated user, that you can post a message. So API are really wide, and it's a bit like an iceberg. You see for some part, you will see some visible information. You maybe have 9 to 10 times more information that are being exchanged, hidden from some human that don't know about that. And like I just said, so API, you have a lot of information that is being hidden behind some complexity. But for us working in engineering, it's most of the time at the core of your system. Like, you can build a website, you can build API, you can build whatever you want. But today, you can have an API without a front-end application. You can build a Node.js API that will allow you to display some JSON information. You don't need to display this information with a front-end. But on the other hand, if you build a front-end application and you don't have an API, like, the content and the end result will be not really useful, I would guess. Like, you won't be able to query dynamically, maybe picture, or being able to send messages, or being able to answer some, or to find information. Like, what would be the main purpose of Google if you cannot search something? What would be the main purpose of Instagram or Facebook or any kind of social network if you cannot see the content from other people and you cannot put or add your own content? Like, it would be useless, right? So this is one example. This is an API, like, it's a GitHub API where I can query one user. So this is a result, the JSON object from my user on GitHub. So you can find my information. And technically, just using that, you don't need a front-end application, you need nothing, just to be able to query it. You are able to find information, which is great. But most of the people are used to have a graphical interface to interact. So here's the GitHub interface of my profile. You can find my name, my nickname, how many repository I do have, some pin repository. You can see how many contribution I did, my picture and everything. And it's great because that's how we are used to display information and to see information and navigate internet today. But technically, you can also use an Excel spreadsheet to just call an HTTP API, which is great because it's working. So that means that the API itself is being able to be used by any way and any mean, not just a front-end application. So just by showing you that, it means that API at the core of your company, it's not the core, it is a core product, sorry. Which means for me that everything else that is not an API is just a way to display some information. It's a good way to display an information. For example, you build an API, let's say a GitHub API. Today, people use a browser on a desktop to display your information. Tomorrow, people use a smartphone for that. That's great, that's perfect. But if tomorrow you want to remove your smartphone application for that, great. It won't impact everything. Like everything will still be working, front-end solution on your browser will be working. That's great, that's perfect. But if tomorrow you remove your API, nothing else will be working anymore. So that means that API become your core product of your company. Remove the API, nothing else work anymore. So that's the main point I want to emphasize is API should be seen or are really part of your core product. It's not a front-end application to display or to allow your user to do something. This is only one mean to work with API. So now that we are, I guess, okay with that, is how can we change the mindset and how can we change the world with API? So first, one thing that's come to mind to me every time I'm talking about API and how it should be core, something that is core to your company, is API first. API first, what that? First is to say that API should be treated as first-class citizen for your, I guess, architecture, conception, but also how your company see technology. Which means that this approach, being API first, means that when you are developing API, you want them to be consistent, reusable, and you want to build something around API across your company as a whole. Not just some part of your company, not maybe just one business unit and every people replicate everything. No, you want to design a pure strategy about API. Which means, for example, you want to establish a contract for each of your API with taking time on how you want to design your API, what should be my field, how my API should answer, what should be my error management, maybe even going through log and everything, but you have to think about that. You also need to plan and see how you want to collaborate between engineering and stakeholder, which are most of the time are part of the business, to be honest. So this is the first part, thinking about building your API, being with a mindset of API first. The second part I also want to talk about is API allow companies to break down capabilities into individual service. Like I won't go through microservices against monolith application or stuff like that. But the main idea also behind the idea of being an API first company is to be able to build a lot of reusable part of the company, component of the company, to build API that serve all application. For example, in a company where you have multiple people and multiple projects that need to send an email, you just want to build one solution to be one microservice to be able to send an email. You don't want each business unit, if you have 10 of them, to build 10 times the same system. Why? Because it would be first way easier to have only one team handle this kind of service for everyone. Two, it will be most of the time a way to reduce your cost because you will be able maybe to take to know how many mails are being sent globally and have a better pricing for that. And also for other team to implement a solution, they won't have to rebuild something from scratch. They will only have to use it, which is a big gain of time and money, to be honest. Okay, great. Quick list of benefit being an API first company. First, you can work in parallel, because if you're working on 3 or 5 or 10 different microservices that don't need to be connected one to each other, you can just split the work in 10 different teams. Like I said, cost reduction, standardization also, because if you have only one service that allow you to send email, you only have to know about one of them. That's all. And speed to market. You don't need to redevelop something else each time. And for us, being in the engineering part, being developer, being architect, or even on the security part, it provides a way better developer experience. And lastly, because your API will become really product oriented, because it will be also a way to shape your ecosystem in your company, both internally and maybe externally, to have everything, every API to answer to a product need or a specific technical need, which is great. And for that, like, I don't want to bother you too much with the technical implementation and everything, but which tool, one really good tool I use a lot, and which is really great because you can use it both on the technical side and on the business side, is using OpenAPI, or as is best known, Swagger. Swagger is a technology that allow you, and OpenAPI is a standard now behind that allow you to define and to describe your API implementation, which it's pretty good because it's pretty easy. It's a bit verbose maybe, but everyone can understand it. You don't have to know about specific technology or specific language, know how to code and everything. It's a way to describe an API with specific words. Like for an example, on the left side, we define a small subset. So if I'm showing you the line 81, we have a post request, which is linked to a tag. We have a summary, a description. We do have something called request body that allow you to describe what should be the content of the request, which define that is an application sending a JSON object, and you can link some schema to define the content on everything. And on the right side, you will have a definition, like a visual definition on what the result, which is great because it allows you to just navigate and to share that with both your business. You as an engineer, you can use that. And if another team needs to implement your API, they can just simply use that because it's a full documentation on how your API is working. One part that is really important, what you want to move that also, and to be global and to be focused on API, is to have a governance group, because you want one group to be able to follow the development of every API in your company, but also to standardize everything. From my perspective and personal experience, having a mixed group of people is the best. People from both engineering and business, because you want to have people having a knowledge on how to implement your API, but you want also to have people that do have this kind of business insight on specific use case and how the company interact, or how different services or different kind of data can interact. It also helps you to guarantee a compliance and specific use case that maybe us in engineering we don't know about. And with that, you can also have people from the both world to work on validating your API, to monitor how people are testing your API, and maybe also just basically to discover missing API part of your system. If the business that is testing or being part of this group see that you cannot, I don't know, create a contract or delete a contract, maybe that's because you have a missing API, then someone needs to build it. It's a good way to interact and to find gap in what you want to build for everyone and for the company. Great. So we agree we need to work together. There is some first insight on how you can to do it, and how it should be built inside the company. And finally, the last part is how can we really like bridge and build a bridge between both the business and engineering, because it's crucial. It's not, for me, it's not a way that some people are writing code and answering question, and on the other side people are giving tasks to another group of people. It should be a collaboration between people with different skill set to accomplish one and to move the company into one specific goal. So with API, and thinking about API should be a core product. So it should be known by the business, because it can also bring value to the business. First, it can, if you have open API, which are available to external people, to people or even other company externally, by opening this API, maybe you will have new customer, new market. You have to think like, the solution of open banking. It allows both current bank, but also new startup or new company to build on top of information that are being available through API. It can also allow you to have some kind of monetization strategy or not, depend on what you want to do, but it's also something that you can keep in mind. It will also let you have and gather more data, because if you have external company or people that use your API, then you have more data coming in. With more data, maybe you will discover new usage or new gap of usage of what you can do and what you can build. And by allowing other business to rely on your API, it just brings more business also to you. So for me, it's a win-win for everyone. Having open API and having API being seen as a core product is a good first step for me. But also, how can we really like build this bridge between engineering and business? We all know that it's most of the time it's really hard for everyone to discuss and to agree on every topic. And this is some key points that you should try to move and to discuss in your company. First, engineering side. What can we do to better interact with the business? First, something that is great and that I don't see a lot is you should provide data to the business about the API, which means share observability, analytics, statistic information you have about your API. Is this API really used? If a specific API is only being called maybe one or twice a week, maybe you should report that to the business. Maybe, I don't know, no one communicated about that. Maybe some people don't know about it, or maybe it's just useless. So maybe we should remove it from our catalog of open API. Another part would be also for us on the engineering part to be a voice, to have a voice on all projects. Let's discuss about everything. Let's bring our idea. Let's find new idea or new API that we want to build. We should also not hide failure. Most of the time, we are all happy to share our successes, but we hide failure. We should like report and still share that, because it's a good way to learn for everyone. And please, please do not hide complexity. Stop saying that this new API or new project can be done in 2 weeks when we all know it will be done in 2 months, because it's not a good way to interact and to discuss with other people working on the same project. But also from the business side, how can you involve people from the engineering side a bit more? First, just ask us questions before giving us a project. Like, what would be our feedback on building it? Maybe we know that we already have an API that allows or allow you to build this kind of system. So no need to create a new project for that. Also, discuss with us about building new feature. Like I said, maybe some of the team already did the work and you don't know about, or maybe just a minor changes and you don't need to rebuild everything from scratch. Also, we try to test and to deliver the best product when possible, but we don't know everything about the business. And most of the time we do work with multiple parts of the business. So please participate on the tasting phases. Just discuss with us, show us some specific use case that we maybe don't know about, but you know about because you work with that every day. So it's a good way also to share knowledge. And one key point is, let's learn the basic about API. Why? Because if the engineering part need to learn a bit about the business, I think it's fair to as a business to learn a bit about the API, because the API are just becoming part of your business. It's another way to communicate with other team or between part of the company and maybe the external world. Just one small part, and it's almost done, about API. You need to consider about building API together and to create an API contract and to see the contract as a product. Use Open API Swagger to build your specification with the business. It's way better to share further knowledge and every possibility that could arise, but also to everyone to have a good understanding on the use case of the API. I think it's really key to have everyone being involved in this project to create API that can be reusable by everyone. And it's also like for the business to be involved in testing it can be great, and how can we leverage that being in the engineering part? It's to find way to get the knowledge that people from the business do have. So every time someone from the business is testing something, you should be able to find a way to reuse and to import that into your own pipeline to just grow your number of tests, of really business tests and maybe edge cases, like seamlessly across your process. And how can you do that? It's quite simple. There is one tool that we almost all use. It's Postman. Postman is just a great tool to reuse tests. You can just use business to write some API test, or to call your API and just ask them to export their collection. If they do it, that's great because it allows you to just import that into your pipeline, and great. You just have a new set of tests that maybe are new or maybe not, but you have tests that the business will provide technically. So that's great. Better test, better way to provide a good API, and we are all safer that way, right? And for the last part, let's all work together. Like, we don't want to fight between engineering and the business. We should all be working together to build better API, faster API, and safer API for all. So let's share the love and let's build API. Thank you.